The searchless essence of devotion to me, taken from Radical Devotion, new writings by the Avataric great sage, Adidas Samraj. 1. The only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, which is the one and only by me revealed and by me given radical way of the heart, is the devotional and in due course progressively spiritual relationship to me, in and as my avatarically born, bodily human divine form and person. 2. The only by me revealed and given way of Adidam is not merely a system of self-applied techniques or egocentric practices to be learned from me and then applied to yourself, independent of me. 3. The entire life of my devotee must be Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga, or the always present time devotional yoga of direct and directly and immediately ego-transcending relationship to me. 4. True religion or real God yoga is the practice of linking or binding or connecting or yoking oneself to reality itself, which is truth itself and the only real God. 5. True religion or real God yoga is the practice of consistently and ultimately most perfectly and therefore permanently moving out of the disposition and the presumption and the very activity of separate and separatist self into the love blissful condition of oneness with that which is one, whole, absolute, all-inclusive and beyond. 6. Therefore, I call my devotees to prepare themselves with the necessary foundation practices of functional, practical, relational, and cultural self-discipline, so they may truly surrender themselves in searchless beholding of me, and in the me receiving response of devotional communion with me. Mere or in heavenly searchless beholding of me is the essence of Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga and of the totality of the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam. The principal exercise of Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga 7 is the moment-to-moment turning of the four principal faculties of body, emotion, mind, and breath to my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person. 8. Action engaged in the ordinary or egoic manner is necessarily conditional and inevitably karmic or ego-bound and ego-binding. Therefore, such ordinary or egoic action necessarily and inevitably reinforces limitation and separateness. Because this is so, my devotees must understand that if they continue to engage in action in the ordinary or egoic manner, they will not be truly and most fully enlightened and set free by virtue of their mere association with me. My devotees must actually do the counter-egoic yoga of actively yielding the principal faculties of the body-mind to me, moment to moment, and under all circumstances, through eager surrendering, eager forgetting, and more ego-transcending heart communion with my avatarically born, bodily human divine form and person. 9. When they thus surrender the principal faculties of the body-mind to me, my devotees are no longer devoted to action in and of itself, and to the effects of action in and of themselves, but they are instead truly transcending themselves in the midst of conditions, and they are thereby progressively, but entirely without seeking, being purified of the effects of action only and entirely through me recognizing responsive devotion to me, in and as my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person. 10. In the midst of daily living and under all various circumstances, there are demands on the body, demands on emotion, demands on mind, and demands on the breath. The conditions of existence make changes in all the principal faculties, moment by moment. I call my devotee to make divine yoga or freedom bonding out of each moment by using body, emotion, mind and breath in eager surrendering heart communion with me, with my avatarically born, bodily human divine form and person. All the mechanisms, 11, that would otherwise automatically conform to the conditions of egoic life or to conditionality altogether must be turned to me. Through that turning, my devotee becomes yoked or freedom bonded to me. 12. Therefore, my devotee must be responsible for the four principal faculties of the body-mind in every moment and under all circumstances. 13. Instead of wandering in the maze of thoughts, give me the faculty of mind, which is epitomized by and as attention itself. 14. Instead of being tossed about by the waves of emotions, give me the faculty of emotion, which is epitomized by and as feeling itself. 15. Instead of seeking bodily pleasure and avoiding bodily pain, turn or face the body toward my avatarically born bodily human divine form, and altogether give me the body through full feeling attention, feeling intention, enacted through constant devotional service to me. 16. The faculties of mind or attention, emotion or feeling, and body are connected to one another via the breath, and thus the gesture of surrender to me must also be done via the breath. 17. Therefore, altogether in the right and true practice of Vishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga, mind or attention, emotion or feeling, and body are given over to me and breathed in heart communion with me. 18. The usual method of the ego, and therefore of ordinary people, is to become involved in what arises, whatever that may be, in any particular circumstance, either by indulging in what arises, or by avoiding what arises, or by otherwise attempting to manipulate what arises. Such strategic effort in relation to what arises is not the yoga of the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, but it is merely the effort of the separate and separative self to struggle with itself. 19. Even so, even to strategically manipulate the separate and separative self itself, in order to surrender the separate and separative self, is nothing but an ineffably fruitless effort of the separate and separative self to struggle with itself. 20. Therefore, in the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, self-surrender is not in any sense a strategic effort to do something to the separate and separative self. Rather, in the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, self-surrender is the mere or inherently searchless beholding of my avatarically born bodily human divine form, and thus and thereby the searchlessly receptive beholding of my avatarically self-transmitted spiritual and always blessing divine presence, and my avatarically self-revealed, very and inherently perfect divine state. On this basis, self-surrender, in the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, is the devotionally me recognizing and altogether devotionally to me attracted and devotionally to me responsive, rather than strategically self-manipulative in giving of the fundamental faculties of the body-mind, which would otherwise be preoccupied with the separate and separative self to me, in and as my avatarically born, bodily human divine form and person, in every moment and under all circumstances. 21. Thus, the secret of Vishira Avatar Bhakti Yoga, and therefore of the entire way of Adidam, is not to struggle with the content that is arising in and as a body-mind, but merely to turn the principal faculties of the body-mind to me, in and as my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person. 22. It is always, in any moment, possible to turn the four principal faculties of the body-mind to my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person, because in and of themselves these faculties stand prior to their objects or apparent contents, and they are therefore never themselves bound to the egoic program of the moment. The mind may be thinking constantly, but the faculty of attention itself has no object or quality, and therefore it can itself always be turned to me. Therefore, there may be reactive emotions arising, but the faculty of feeling is not itself qualified by any such objects, and therefore it can itself always be turned to me. The condition of the body may, at any moment, be disturbance or dis-ease or lack of well-being in one or another respect or function or organ, but the faculty of the body or the functional body itself in total or as a whole can itself always be turned to me. The cycle of the breath may be affected by forms of mind, reactive emotions and bodily states, but the faculty of the breath is not itself identical to the ever-changing contents of the body-mind, and therefore it can itself always be turned to me. 23. Taken all together, the four principal faculties of the body-mind effectively account for all human functions. 24. In any one or a combination of the four principal faculties is not rightly, truly, fully and fully devotionally turned to me, and thus merely by searchlessly beholding me, brought into communion with me, then that faculty or combination of faculties reverts to the domain of egoity, and therefore to the contents of egoity. However, if my devotee always turns all four faculties, which are at the root of all aspects of human existence, directly to me, in mere or in heavenly searchless beholding of my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person, then egoity or egocentricity and self-contraction and separativeness is not reinforced, but it is always pleasantly forgotten and progressively made obsolete. Thus, 25. In the right, true, full and fully devotional practice of Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga, there is no struggle with separate and separative self. 26. Because the four principal faculties are senior or always prior to their content, each of the four principal faculties of the body-mind is always available either to be reactively turned to its own apparent content or to be devotionally turned to me, in and as my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person. 27. Therefore, truly, there are no moments when the me beholding turning of the otherwise separate and separative self to me is more difficult than in other moments, unless my devotee turns to and identifies with the apparent content of the separate and separative body-mind self. If my devotee is simply remembering me and invoking me, and thus and thereby whole bodily, or as a psychophysical totality, communing with me, in and as my avatarically born bodily human divine form and person, in disposition and intention and action, then the yoga Rishira Avatara Bhakti is direct and inherently easy or free of struggle with separate and separative self. 28. My devotee who is rightly, truly, fully and fully devotionally practicing the yoga Rishira Avatara Bhakti does not in any sense strategically use or seek with or struggle with the separate and separative self. Rather, my devotee, who is rightly, truly, fully and fully devotionally practicing the yoga of Rishira Avatara Bhakti, makes the separate and separative self itself obsolete by not using it, or, that is to say, by allowing the total body mind, via its four principal faculties, to simply turn to me, and to whole bodily heart respond to me, in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form and person, until, in due course, through ecstatic absorption in and ultimately perfect self-identification with, and most ultimately divine self-realization of me, the separate and separative self utterly vanishes in me. 29. Therefore, always to me responsively turn bodily to me, and in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form. Always turn to me, in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form, by means of the to me responsive exercise of your feeling. 31. Always to me responsively turn your attention to me, in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form. 32. Always turn to me by means of the whole bodily, to me responsive breathing regard of me, in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form. 33. This is the sadhana, in the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam. Always turn to me and searchlessly behold me, no matter what content, what sympathies, or what egoic programs arise. 34. Always turn all of the faculties of the body-mind to me, in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form and person. 35. Always turn to me, and thus and thereby surrender and forget yourself in the mere or in heavenly searchless beholding of me, rather than turn back on yourself to see if anything is changing. 36. That pure searchless act of turning to me, in and as my avatarity born, bodily human divine form and person, such that mere beholding of me becomes eager surrendering, eager forgetting, and more eager transcending, receptive feeling contemplation of me in every moment, is Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga. 37. To turn to me responsively with each and all of the faculties of the body-mind is not self-contraction or the avoidance of relationship, but rather it is counter-egoic and in heavenly ego-forgetting practice of me consciousness or devotional communion with me. 38. The programs of egoic habit do not persist unless you give them your life energy and attention. If you give your life energy and attention to me instead, then all your egoic programs will ultimately become obsolete and literally vanish. That is the divine truth and the divine law. 39. You reinforce or become whatever you put your attention on or to. Therefore, if you make me the object of your attention, all the other things of attention which have no permanence will dissolve. 40. If you merely or in heavenly searchlessly turn to me, the virtue that I am will prove itself. Therefore, I will prove myself to you without your egoic effort, if you will do this simple, devotionally and in heavenly, counter-egoic turning to me. 41. The true fulfillment of the practice of Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga is always a matter of my divinely self-giving avataric grace and my graceful avatarically given divine self-revelation. 42. I offer to each and to all the gift of the possibility of this devotional and ultimately most perfectly liberating relationship with me. 43. Devotion to me is in heavenly love blissful. To remember yourself is not bliss. To remember yourself is stress and struggle. To always remember to merely turn to me, and as an inevitable consequence, to forget yourself is to live in my love bliss happiness. 44. Therefore, whether you are at the beginning of your practice of the way of Adidam, or in the fully established process of the esoteric stages of the way of Adidam, The essential practice is always the same, searchless and receptive devotional turning to me with all your parts. And the realization thus served is always the same, realization of me, and thus and thereby of reality itself, which is truth itself, or the only real God. 45. True devotion to me, or the right, true, full and fully devotional practice of Ishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga, is the only happiness and the only freedom from the steel-hard mechanical and chemical bondage of suffering in which you are otherwise investing yourself. 46. Therefore invoke me, feel me, breathe me, and serve me. Make no room for anything else. That is what it is to be my true devotee. 47. Thus I call all my formerly practicing devotees to always, in every moment, turn all of the principal faculties of the body, mind to me, rather than to the ego act of self-contraction. 48. Give me that devotion right, true and full, and you will see me shining in my bright simplicity here. 49. If you always turn to me in and as my avatarically born, bodily human divine form and person, and if thus and thereby receiving me, you always responsively surrender to the avatarically self-transmitted divine spiritual presence of my person, then by means of my divinely self-giving avataric spiritual grace and my graceful avatarically given divine self-revelation, you will ultimately most perfectly realize reality or truth or real causal God. 50. My avatarically born and divinely bright bodily human form, and my avatarically self-transmitted and omnipresent and here descending divine spiritual presence, and my divine inherently egoless and non-separate state of person are as one, the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, which is the radical way of the heart itself. I must give my avataric word of divine heart instruction for the sake of all and all, but the divine way itself is simply me, the one and only and bright divine person who is non-separateness itself, avatarically appearing here, self-manifested in bodily human divine form before you, without any limitations whatsoever. 51. Therefore, Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga is not an ego-based or self-referring or self-manipulating practice of strategic surrender. Rather, it is an always devotionally me recognizing, devotionally to me attracted, and always presently directly and immediately ego-transcending practice of inherently searchless turning to me, and thus and thereby of unconditional surrender of separate and separative self to me, merely by beholding me, and thus and thereby receiving me and responsively yielding to me. 52. The always present time circumstance of right, true, full and fully devotionally Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga is darshan, or remembering, and if and when possible, direct physical sighting of my avatarically born and divinely bright bodily human form, and darshan, or heart locating, of my avatarically self-revealed and divinely bright, and all in all surrounding, and all in all pervading, divine spiritual body, and darshan, or heart beholding, and heart realizing, of my avatarically self-revealed, and self-evidently divine person, the inherently egoless, divine self-condition, and source condition of all and all. 53. Rishira Avatara Bhakti Yoga is worship of me, the bright itself in person, as my avatarically born bodily human divine form, and thus and thereby as my avatarically self-transmitted spiritual and always blessing divine presence, and as my avatarically self-revealed and very and transcendental and perfectly subjective and inherently spiritual and inherently egoless and inherently perfect and self-evidently divine state. 54. Therefore, from the beginning of your practice of the only by me revealed and given way of Adidam, always formally practice with Shiva Avatara Bhakti Yoga, rightly, truly, fully, and fully devotionally, and be thereby always wholeheartedly turned to me, in and as my avatarically born, bodily human divine form and person. Da.